Hello and welcome to Building the Premier Accounting Firm. This is a podcast dedicated to helping accounting professionals have a successful accounting, bookkeeping, and tax business. It's in this show that we dedicate our time to introducing guests to help us actually focus on the things that matter most, ranging from marketing, selling, pricing, onboarding clients, client relationships, having actually the fortitude as an accountrepreneur to run our business with confidence and competence. It's all those things that matter so that you can be the leader you need to be and in fact have the success that you're striving to achieve. Now, as your host, I'm Roger Knecht, president of Universal Accounting Center, and for more than 20 years, I've been working with accounting professionals to help them start and build their accounting, bookkeeping, and tax businesses. I've done this around the world, and I've been helping individuals succeed, and I've made a number of friends along the way, and I'm excited to share with you these experiences as well as these best practices so that you can actually have the premier accounting firm in your area. My guest today is Jeff Cohen. Jeff happens to be a desired speaker with experience facing off with the sharks on ABC's Shark Tank. Now, with over 20 years of entrepreneurial experience, being a management consultant and business coach, Jeff is a highly effective business and turnaround strategist. He helps companies create enormous business value, operate effectively, and prepare for an exit. He's an expert team builder and aligns people and skills for high growth and performance. So, Jeff, welcome to the show.
Wow, thank you, Roger. What a great introduction. And I'm grateful to be here with you today and your audience. And I just want to start out with one thing.
Please.
I want everyone to know there's nothing off limits today. Roger, I invite you to ask the really hard questions because the easy ones everybody gets. The hard ones really drive some education and learning. And, I've got a lot of experience doing great things. Some of those things didn't turn out so well. And because of that, I wear a badge of honor with the word radioactive because Kevin O'Leary called me that on Shark Tank. But that signifies a lot of pain that I've experienced. And coming out of that is something that I think a lot of people in this world have done and a lot of people sometimes struggle with. So, my goal is to help people get to a place where they never go through what I went through. And they get the benefit of knowing that, all of those things that they're afraid to ask or afraid to talk about, well, someone else is.
Well, first of all, challenge accepted. I'm happy to dive in here. Let's see how well we do together. I know that you're big about accountability. So let's try that for a topic. One of the things that I know as entrepreneurs is we are running our businesses. We're entrepreneurs, but really it's lonely at the top is the proverbial phrase. We don't have anyone else that's really that we're accountable to unless we've got a board of advisors and so forth. But that's not what an accounting business typically has. It's just the owner. So we're maybe accountable to ourselves. We might be accountable to a partner. We might be accountable to a spouse. But why, when we look at accountability, do we fail so much?
Accountability gets a bad rap. You think about the last time you heard the word accountable, and it was probably last night on the 6 o'clock news and someone was going to jail. Or maybe there was a politician that people didn't like that needed to be held accountable. And the thing is that people hate being held accountable. A lot of people translate that to the concept of being held at gunpoint. And that's not a fun experience. So accountability is something people generally resist. That's one of the reasons that it's a difficult topic in a lot of organizations, especially when you're a solopreneur, right? Mm-hmm. Who are you accountable to? Is it you? Is it your spouse? Is it your client? And even with that, do you even think about the word accountable? So when we look at that, and I've done a lot of looking at that over the years, I, in fact, took a 2-year program that helped me get a handle on accountability, like as it isn't a bad thing. But I noticed in doing that and working with about 50 CEOs, business owners, and entrepreneurs at the time, to identify what wasn't working in their businesses, it was really more about effective communication. And so going from accountability to effective communication and identifying where the gaps were led me to where I identified the one thing people really, really will stand up for.
Well, as I'm hearing this, there's something that I'd like to contribute, which is as accounting professionals, accounting or accountability is part of accounting. I think that's a core root to what we're obviously doing as a profession. And there's some synonyms that I think would be appropriate for this discussion. First of all, with accountability, there is a sense of truth. We're looking for accurate, clear, truthful information. And the accountability is to say that it's all accounted for. It's all there. We're not missing anything. We're not being misleading or dishonest. We're being transparent. And with accounting, we're also trying to say that there's a narrative going on here. It's a truthful story. And in all of that, we as an accounting professional have a responsibility to the story or the narrative of the business to make sure that everything we're giving to the business owners in the context of numbers truly reflects what the company is experiencing and doing. But you're also looking at it from, I think, a characteristic point of view. You're looking at it from, as an individual, I've got this accountability to myself, my core beliefs, my characteristics as who I am as a person. Am I being truthful to me, to my spouse, to my partner, to my employees, to my customers, you mentioned? So as we're keeping that accountability there, why do we fail so often when we know people are relying on us, but yet we drop the ball perhaps?
It's a great question, Roger. Really great. So why do we fail so often around accountability? Remember, we are all human beings. We are not accountability machines. And we have this human trait that has us drawn to the things that we have strengths in, that we are good at, and that we like doing. Now, as a human being, if your job has those three things, Roger, what would you call it?
My passion.
Right. It's like your dream job.
Yeah.
Like that is the thing you would like put everything aside to do. The thing is, though, people change over time. And what was once your dream job may not be today. And we as leaders don't recognize that often enough with the people we work with and that we employ. Now, I know we're talking to a lot of individual accountants, but I also know that we're talking to people that work with CFOs and CEOs and COOs to help them ensure that what they're doing financially has an audit trail and there's accountability behind it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you can track it. But those people will not get what they want from their companies if they're holding their people just accountable. If they're not looking for what those things are that their people are passionate about, that their people are drawn toward, that their people put first. And there's a big gap there. I want you to know, I'm talking to you from the mind of someone. I spent 6 years working in banking. And when I did that, I was everything from a part-time teller to the chief teller to I was the audit specialist for the bank. And I went from branch to branch doing audits. So it's all about, accountability, auditability, actionable items that either are working or are not working. And I know that exists in accounting. When you get to the real world in business and you start applying that to people, you have to remember people resist being accountable. There's really only one person, in my opinion, that's accountable in a company, and that's the founder or CEO. That person's accountable for everyone they employ and everyone whose income they're responsible for. And they're also responsible to identify the most effective way for people to work. That's where I come in.
Well, as you're describing this, you're hitting very close to home for me, because one of the things that I regularly do with our clients is we teach this principle of creating a culture of accountability. And it's obviously a play on the fact that we're trying to focus on the numbers. We do emphasize key performance indicators and identifying for every department and person within the company one key metric that represents success. If they do that one thing, we'll consider them as having achieved or done their job. When you look at that, there's clarity. I think one of the things that accountability brings is clarity. You're able to actually define success. It's a numerical value. It's an absolute. And as long as we cross that threshold, get beyond that break-even point, for example, we can consider it a success. But what you're describing is, I think, even at a character level, beyond just a professional level. When you say this is what you do, what? Tell me more about that.
Sure. Well, first off, Roger, I really want to acknowledge you, because what you just described is the way most people view accountability and KPIs.
Okay.
And I think both are really important. How you implement that either works or does not work for people, and it changes over time depending on where that person is on their journey with your organization. So what do I mean by that? Well, I'm going to use me as an example. I've grown up in sales. I've been CEO. I've taken other executive roles in companies, big and small. I've worked with over 300 organizations in my Business Accelerator program today. I have a very connected view of what I do today, and I'm confident about what you can count on me for and what you can't count on me for. Mm-hmm. And early in my career, I tell you, hire me as a sales guy. I'm the best one out there for you, because that's what I loved doing. I was strong in, and I loved it, and I was good at it. And over time, what happened is I wanted more responsibility, and I wanted to take something more on. I became an entrepreneur and a CEO. Uh-huh. And, when I've gone through good and bad spots in my career, I've fallen back on being a sales guy, because in the world, we hire people based on their experience, not necessarily what they want. And we don't identify that going forward. It's just we hire an A player to do that A job. And during that hiring process, we'll sometimes say, oh, by the way, it's our last interview. We think we want you, but then we throw something on like, will you also do the dishes for us? Now, I hate doing the dishes. My wife will tell you that. But the minute you do that, you've now set that person up to disappoint you. So now you've got this A person and you've given them a B job. Now, that messes with people. But they take the job because they really want it, and you really want them to do the primary part of their job, and now you've got something, though, that is not the right fit. So I don't think people really do a good job of analyzing where their employees are at in their journey with them. I think it's the CEO's responsibility and accountability to ensure their organization is set up so that there's alignment between what the CEO wants delivered and what their people are doing. I think also with that comes a certain level of trust. And when you look at trust, it's not just, oh, I trust you. What do you trust me for? Like, people don't actually get down to the granular level of what is trust in context. So trust and alignment are two areas that I see gaps frequently in organizations. And people in those organizations feel like they're doing the best job they can do. It's just, you've got 5 executives that report to the CEO, and they're all in sports cars driving on different freeways. And one of them's going to San Francisco and the other one's going to Las Vegas. But they're going to get there really fast.
And have fun along the way, I hope.
They may. It's just
they're going the wrong place. They're not going
to be fulfilling on what the CEO wants.
Exactly. So here's a question. When we're talking about accountability and when we talk about failures, which you brought up at the very beginning, share with me 3 failures, and I'm going to be very specific. Where have you failed your customers and what did you learn from it? Where did you fail your employees and what did you learn from it? And where was it that you failed your family or a family member and what did you learn from it? So 3 failures: customer, employees, family.
Yeah, those are really big. And, truth in lending, I might cry because it really hurts today still as I think about it. I had an amazing company. We grew from nothing to 50 people in about 2 years. We were, high 7 figures, low 8 figure kind of a business. And we were crushing it.
Yeah.
2007 hit and the market totally crashed. And all of our clients were companies like Wells Fargo and B of A, the state of California, Kaiser Permanente. Like these were Fortune 500, Global 2000 companies. And they all at the same time said, we love you. And we're putting everything on hold. And I learned what it was like to be insolvent.
Wow.
And I declared bankruptcy. And I was very depressed. And here's the thing about that period in my life, Roger. As CEO, I really felt responsible for 50 families. And suddenly I couldn't pay my people. And it was awful. So I didn't sleep well at night. Mm-hmm. Always wondering, will I make the next payroll as we're, coming to this controlled crash, but will I make the payroll? How do we manage that? What do we do? And it wasn't really healthy, but I just needed an escape. So I found myself in front of Star Trek 8 hours a day.
Wow.
And I'd be laying on the couch and I really just pushed my family away. Because really nothing else matters more, at least to me, than family. But what I did was I put this wall between me and my wife and my kids. It got to where like my wife would leave the house in the morning and come back after dinner. My kids would come home from school and they would go play video games or do their homework or whatever they were doing, but I wouldn't see them. And I was in the same building, same house.
Wow.
And I just realized, I was very depressed at the time. We look at mental health a lot differently today than we did back then. It really hurt. And my kids tell me today, hey, Dad, that's not a problem. Like, we love you. But when I got divorced, they wouldn't talk to me for 2 years. And reestablishing that relationship took something. And I am sorry about that today. And I'm also sorry about all the employees that I mistreated along the way, because when you're in that frame of mind and you're not thinking clearly, I was in survival mode and I was not doing the right thing by my people a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. Like I cared and I had this constraint that kept me from being able to. And, a lot of these people came to work for us because we had this great vision. They had special experience and they were amazing until I wasn't. And, I'm just really sorry for treating people poorly, not being able to be in communication with people in a way that was effective, not being able to acknowledge where I was and being straight with people that needed me to be straight until like it was too late.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that because I think there's some valuable lessons in there. One, in business, there's always those things that are outside of our control. But as the owner, the CEO, the president of the company, you're right. There is a responsibility that we have to all those on payroll. There's families that are impacted by decisions that we're making. And sometimes we can put the company at too great a risk and kind of roll the dice towards success. And maybe that's the consequence that we face when we are running the company, is seeing that unravel like you saw. But the one thing that I remember as you were sharing your story is a quote that I was taught when I was younger, which is, no success can compensate for failure in the home. And what I heard you sharing there is some good lessons learned and life's lessons learned that after that estrangement from your children, you appreciate the relationships you obviously have with them now. That's huge, and I'm seeing that on both a personal and a professional level. What are some of the lessons you learned though from those experiences, from that failure?
So number one, we first off, we had a very fast growing company. What's the number one thing that a fast growing company needs? Money.
Cash.
Cash. We were at a time in the marketplace where my house was increasing in value like $100,000 a year. So guess what I did? I remortgaged it every year for 4 or 5 years. And I put all that money back in because it was going to pay off. So big lesson, number one, yeah, don't mortgage your house. I also talked to venture capital people, and they all came across to me like sharks, and they were. They would have put money in the company, and then I probably would not have had the losses because they probably would have had us shut down a lot faster. But I was emotionally attached. It was my baby.
Yeah.
When you get emotionally attached to your business, you do things like that sometimes. There's nothing wrong. It's a human trait. Like, we get emotionally attached to things.
Well, after putting so much time and energy into it, I would expect nothing less.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Then the question is, does that serve us? And the answer to that is maybe and maybe not. Like, being able to step out of the emotional experience you're having into one that's common sense oriented, it takes something. Like, I work with people today one-on-one and with their teams to make sure that they can have a third-party view of what's occurring. They're able to be heard when times are tough or good.
Yeah.
And then they're getting the opportunity to hear someone say, hey, look, and I've done this more than once. You're at an inflection point in your business and something's just happened. And I've saved people hundreds of thousands of dollars by being able to look with them and help them see openly and honestly, it's not worth putting money into advertising right now because an event just happened. And you're better off finding something else to do. I had one entrepreneur. I love this woman. She's amazing. She had a business where she was taking people to Cuba to on tours.
Okay.
She was killing it, having a blast. Her business was growing. And she was about to put a medium 5-figure sum into advertising. And Donald Trump had just become president and eliminated normal relationships with Cuba. Right as she was about to spend the money. And she wasn't seeing it clearly because her dream was like to fill the tour and the following tours. And within an hour, she really got what a risk that was.
Wow. You know, as you're sharing these stories, it's reminding me these past few years with COVID, when the economy was shut down, I remember taking numerous phone calls from clients where they were sharing, like you just mentioned, the chain of events, things stopping on a dime, clients coming and rescinding orders. It was incredible because you're right. Things can happen so quickly that we have very little, if any, control over, yet we need to react and pivot accordingly. And when you were talking about the employees, the ones that were dependent, I remember myself and clients dealing with situations related to cash flow as it relates to payroll, not having the funds, and the owner was either not taking home a paycheck or taking home much less, but yet trying to pay all the vendors and employees. And yet we're the ones going home and having that uncomfortable conversation with our spouse to say, yeah, I probably worked as hard, if not harder than everyone else at the company, but honey, I had to forego payroll this time, and I don't have anything to bring home. How are we going to make our mortgage? How are we going to feed our kids? I don't know, but at least everybody else can. There's a lot of sacrifice that we do that's very selfless to keep the company alive, to keep those people that are dependent on us happy and meeting their needs. And there's that sacrifice that honestly sometimes goes unnoticed, unspoken. No one's the wiser, and yet it is lonely at the top as business owners make these decisions. And that's what I think accounting professionals are privy to, if not experiencing themselves. So,
Well, wait, Roger, before you go to your question, you really need to respond to what you just said.
go ahead.
Stop that. Treat yourself like the number one employee.
Thank you.
As CEO or founder of your business, if you are not the most secure person in your company is insecure.
Thank you.
Stop it. It's not okay.
You're not doing anyone any favors by shorting yourself and losing any interest in maintaining the company that's struggling because you're the one suffering the most. And obviously, you're probably working harder and doing more than anyone else. So why is it that you're suffering? So you've got to reevaluate some of the ways you're coming to that conclusion to believe that you're doing anyone a favor. Hurting yourself and losing the momentum and the enthusiasm to do the business because you're suffering sometimes is not the right thing.
So this is what happens, Roger. People call you because you're the accountant and you know all the numbers and you work with a lot of different businesses. So you have an insight about how that all goes. And you run your own business. So you know what it's like to run a business, and they're looking for you for support and advice. And when I became a profit-first professional, like I would give that with a view toward running the business as opposed to a view toward running the finances of the business. But when I look at what I do with clients, and the reason I wrote the book Count Honorable was because I want people to get the experience of being count honorable or not count honorable and what for. And as CEO or founder of your business, or even as a solopreneur, you can have pride to say you can count on me for something, or you cannot count on me for something. But being accountable gets resisted all over the place. And back to like me putting good money after bad into my company, bad idea. My business coach at the time said to me when I was shutting the company down, says, Jeff, you need to be solvent, or as solvent as you can be. Because if you're not, you can't do anything to help anybody else. And that caused me great stress. And he's not wrong. So I just, Roger, I know I yelled a minute ago. I apologize.
That's okay. Our producer will tone it down a little bit.
but really struck a nerve with me, because that is the mindset people have. They feel like they owe other people, and there is like people are counting on them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's relating to the fact that many people are nurturing in their nature. And what we're trying to do is basically nurture our business, nurture our employees. And so there's that selflessness that comes into it. And oftentimes the business owner is the one that takes it. And what I think they need to hear from what we're saying here is you're not doing the business any favors, making you so uncomfortable and making the company so undesirable to run that you want to shut it down. You've got to keep it worth working for, make it profitable. You brought up profit first. The whole idea of that premise is you're in business for a reason, profit being one of the main reasons. If you're not being profitable, why does the company exist? Therefore, make it the first thing, make it the preeminent thing. If you're making money, then you can sustain and pay your bills and pay the employees. But profit being first is where it all begins. And Now, you brought up count onable. I want to dive into that a little bit deeper.
Sure.
Not only did you write the book, but what's the premise behind it? I mean, you're doing a play on words there, but what does count onable mean?
Well, it's a great question, Roger. And back to the beginning when I was saying, accountability has a bad rap, right?
Uh-huh.
If you're being held accountable, most people feel like they have a gun to their head because someone is saying, you're responsible for this. And and then they don't put a structure in place to actually manage that accountability, because accountability requires two people to be committed to something. The person that's doing it and the person that's managing it. Otherwise, all you have is this environment where you don't want to be a micromanager and you're trusting people to do something until you're frustrated, you don't have it. And suddenly they get a phone call at 4:00 on Friday before a long weekend saying, where is it? And now they become defensive and give you lots of reasons why it's not done yet. So in 2013, I took a 2-year program called the Team Management and Leadership Program.
Okay.
And when I did that program, I got very familiar with accountability. And I noticed that I was not being accountable. What I also noticed was a lot of other people didn't want to be accountable either. And I decided I was going to start getting CEOs and business owners and entrepreneurs together. And I got about 50 people in those categories together in small groups. And we started really looking at what was not working in our companies. And what I noticed was a fundamental flaw that businesses and people have in life. Because what I'm going to tell you now works in my personal life as well as in my business life. And I have way fewer arguments with my wife because of it. So what happens is everybody has their own definition of effective communication. But oftentimes it goes like this. I was with a friend of mine and we were taking our daughters to work. My wife and I have a 1-year-old foster daughter. We're in the foster to adopt program.
Okay.
And we love this little girl. And I was going to dinner with my friend, his daughter, who's 7 years old, and my 1-year-old. The two girls were in the wagon. We were pulling the wagon to the restaurant. 7-year-old's having a great time with her. We finished dinner. We're off to the yogurt store to get frozen yogurt. And we're almost there when I turn my head and look back and I see my 1-year-old is standing up. She can't walk yet. In the wagon, holding on with this look on her face of fear for dear life. And the 7-year-old is looking at her phone playing a game. And I asked my friend to stop, and I went over and comforted my daughter and put her back down. And I turned to the 7-year-old and I said, hey, honey, I'm just curious. Did you notice that she was standing? She goes, yeah, I told you. I said, oh. I said, can I ask you a favor? She goes, sure. I said, if she does that again and you tell me, can you make sure that I heard you? She goes, got it. In the world today, got it is a very common term. I hear it all the time. And so she went back to playing her game.
Okay.
And before I let go of the conversation, I said, hey, I'm just curious. What did you get? And she took 15 seconds before she responded. And I'm not exaggerating. And I just stood there. And my friend was so gracious with this. And then she picked her head up and she looked at me and she said, I should make sure you heard me. That was the moment I knew the message landed. How often, Roger, do you hear conversations where you know that someone has truly gotten what you said?
Well, I'd like to think most of the time, but I'm aware of the fact that it's not often enough.
Yeah. And in that, I think what we often find is that people say, got it, and then they go and do something. And then they come back and it's either partially done or something else was done, or it's not even prioritized. Guess what? That communication is not one you can count on. It doesn't work. So with these 50 CEOs, I created a program called Next Level 90, which is a business accelerator program.
Okay.
It's a business accelerator program because when you get stuff done, it accelerates the performance of your business. And it focuses on communication, goal setting, milestones, and what you want from your business in your life. And it helps you shift your culture from one where you're telling people what to do and telling them they're accountable to one where people can say, you can count on me for this and for this. But Roger, you cannot count on me to wash the dishes. And there's no penalty when they say that. Because the bottom line about being countable is, this is not hockey, it's business. We don't want to put people in a penalty box and take them out and reduce their productivity because there's something they don't want to do, doesn't cater to their strengths, and they don't like it. So I created a process that I'm patenting, which is the countable method and process that I wrote the book about. And by the way, every step in that process is in the book. Like, you can implement it yourself. If you want help, reach out. I'm happy to help. You can do it yourself and create an environment and a culture where people can be countable because they wear that badge with pride. When they can tell you, Roger, you can count on me for something, it's usually something they're good at, they like doing, and caters to their strengths. And when they tell you you can't count on me for something, you've just saved yourself weeks or months, because now you can go find a resource that can do that, that loves doing that, that wants to do that. Isn't that what you want in your business?
You know, as you're describing that, it's reminding me of some things that I've experienced. I remember 20 plus years ago, as I was in meetings, I used to actually have the phrase, once I'd been given a direction and I'd written it down, I would actually say done. And I'd tell the person done as if it was past tense. It's been taken care of. And it was meant to basically say, I'm accountable, like you're describing. You can count on me. But the thing that I would add to this is what I'm hearing you say is, with this communication, is you're establishing clear expectations, kind of back to what we were talking about earlier when I shared key metrics, what really at the end of the day is expected. And what I recall when I was in college in one of my business or my communication classes was this poignant message of, like you were saying, it's not the communicator's role to necessarily say everything and believe that the listener understood it. It's actually that the communicator needs to get communication from the listener that confirms that they understood. And so it's not so much that we need to be communicating clearly, it's that we need to be listening better to know, did they understand what's expected? And only once we hear from those people that we're talking to, whether it's our customers, our employees, our family members, if we communicate effectively and then listen that they've now confirmed that they understand what's expected, are we going to be happy? Because there could be miscommunication, or there could be that gotcha moment where they're just kind of placé pushing it off, I guess.
100%. I agree, which is why when you look at other systems like scaling up and like Traction, Gino Wickman's entrepreneur operating system, they all say things like, you need to have the right person doing the right job at the right time.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anyone that would disagree. The difference is, as I worked through a lot of those programs with clients and looked at what would work and what didn't work with them, they often didn't know how to figure out that they had the right person doing the right job at the right time.
Good point.
And so what I created, and I listed all in the book, is a meeting schedule that says, this is the meeting schedule. This is how often you meet. And I call them verify meetings. The reason I call them a verify meeting is, do you remember back in the 80s, Ronald Reagan signed the SALT Treaty with Mikhail Gorbachev?
That's right. Trust but verify.
Exactly. So listen, trust, no one wants to be considered a micromanager. But they don't necessarily put a management structure in place for verification. So I created that. You don't have to be a micromanager to manage. If you're a manager of people, you're really not managing people. What you're managing are promises. And that's where the value of this method is. It helps you eliminate the emotion and helps you know what to say and how to say it in those meetings so you don't trigger people. Because the number one thing, in fact, the very first chapter of my book is called Grand Theft Auto. And in that chapter, I will share with you the number one trigger I have, and I've carried it with me my entire life from childhood to adulthood, and every relationship and every job and every manager and boss I've had has triggered me. And when that happens, it's not pretty. And even with all of the experience I have in identifying that trigger today, my wife will use it. And I now can say to her, hey, honey, you have just triggered the heck out of me. Are you really sure you want to have that conversation now, or can I cool off first? And let me just tell you how many arguments we have avoided because she says, no, take 5.
Yes.
And I can sort myself out and then come back to it. But it's the same thing in business with your people. And it's why if you use this process, you'll save 2 to 3 hours a week if you manage 5 or 6 people, because you will no longer get the defensive reasons why they haven't done something, when all you really want to know is it done? Are you going to do it? Should I assign it to someone else?
Yeah. Well, that's where I also feel that clear metric of, I don't want to micromanage, as you mentioned earlier. I just need this done. Is it done? When will it be done? How you're doing it, when you're doing it. I'll let you all figure that out. I'm paying you well enough. You can take care of it. I just want to know this will be done on what day at what time. Thank you. Okay. And then move on. And that accountability that you're referring to is just being clear in that messaging as to what's expected. But let me do this. I'm really liking this conversation. I'd like to kind of summarize it and draw out some of the highlights that stood out to me, and then come back to you and see if you have a closing thought for us that we can take from this. Would that be all right?
Amazing. Go right ahead, Roger.
Perfect. Well, before I get started in the summary, I do want to mention that Jeff has been so kind as to offer basically the first chapter of his book that he's releasing. And in the episode description, you can go to his website and there receive some free resources as well as the first chapter to his book to see what it is that these count-onable traits are, so that you can actually apply this in your business and better manage the relationships that you have personally and professionally. So basically what I want to encourage you to do is to go to the episode description, where you will find the information needed to get that free resource and first chapter. We also brought up, he mentioned in passing, profit first, and I think it would be appropriate for you to learn a little bit more about what that is, where profit is something that can be deliberate and intentional. In fact, as the mission of of Profit First is, it's to eradicate entrepreneurial poverty. And so go there to find out what that involves and get a free copy of the book, Profit First. The book is there for you to learn this principle of how you can make it a priority in your business. And with that, also get a copy of the book In the Black. It's 9 principles to make your business profitable. So once you are profitable, to sustain and maintain that profit. Now, as a summary of what we were discussing today, I really think communication is key. Jeff was very clear as to point out that we need to be very deliberate in what it is we're saying, but also listening to make sure that, like the 7-year-old, we're not just getting that gotcha, we're getting more of a clear understanding of what's expected so that we can hold people accountable and really trust that they're going to come through with what's expected. The other thing that I thought was very important is how he's now, through his experience, identified what it is that really makes up for someone to be a count-onable person. And if we can really emphasize these various traits that he's addressing, we'll become that much more reliable to the people that we're responsible to, that depend on us. And at the end of the day, I would expect that we're going to become more productive and effective in the things that we do just because we're more focused on what's expected. Now, that being said, I also want to just encourage you to learn a little bit more on what you can actually do to become a part of this little movement that Jeff is creating, where we can be basically better people because we're all dependent upon one another. At the end of the day, this is a world made up of many. And if we are able to depend on everybody to stay in their lanes, follow the traffic laws, everything else you can think of, will be a lot happier and a lot more productive. So with all that being said, Jeff, what more would you like to add to this as a closing thought?
Well, first off, Roger, I really want to acknowledge you for getting it. Like, it really takes something to go from the mind of, oh no, we're going to talk about accounting and numbers today, to communication. And so I really want to acknowledge you, like you did a great summary there. And I want to invite people, come to the counthonorable.com website. Again, the link will be in the show notes, and download all the free resources. Like I said, I'm patenting this process, but I'm also open sourcing it so that anybody can implement it themselves. And if you need some support, reach out through one of our communities or put some time on my calendar or one of my people's calendars, and we'll make sure that you get support so that you can have a count-onable organization. It's about the culture, right? You can either have a culture where people are defensive or one where they take the lead and an ownership mentality. And if you're an owner of a business and someday you want to have an exit that does not have a 5-year earnout, then you want to create leaders and leadership in your organization. This is the way to do that. It's Count Honorable, a practical guide to lift, shift, and empower you and your team. And so with that, I just want to thank you, Roger, and tell people, stop being just accountable. Be count honorable.
I love it. In addition to creating a culture of accountability, I like this count honorable approach. It just basically says there's a process, there's a way that we can actually expect things from our employees, from ourselves, and I believe at the end of the day, get much more accomplished because it's clear what's expected. So thank you. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to wrap up our episode here today, thanking Jeff for being on the show. Like all of our other episodes, I think this was a very appropriate and very timely message for us to actually listen to as we're running our businesses and building the premier accounting firms in our area. As for the podcast, I encourage you to subscribe. Whatever platform you're listening to and prefer, subscribe to us. Listen to the other episodes that we have as we address a variety of topics that are related to you running an effective business. And at the same time, if you want more information about this principle and other principles, I invite you to listen and or actually go to universalaccounting.com or give us a phone call at 801-265-3777. And always remember this, if it is about accounting, it is accountable and universal. Take care and have a great day.